Same old man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious? Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for April 2nd, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for what is sure to be a titanic conversation. A
Very
monstrous
one.
review.
I was going to say a monstrous one. We got a three-headed monster here. I can't wait for it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm very excited about that. As Brendan is alluding to there, we have a really fun guest for this episode. One, it's due that he's coming back because it's been quite a few years. 2021 was the last time he was here, so
Yeah.
that's part of it. Also, if you follow him on Twitter, and you should, this lovely gentleman has been watching a lot of Godzilla movies leading up to this. So we'll have him talk about it. But joining us is the great Kevin Lee from AwardsWatch. Kevin, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yes, absolutely. As I said, it's been way too long since you've been here. So
Indeed.
this was due. However, we have to open with, you just watched a gazillion Godzilla movies over the last
Yes,
few
I
months.
have. I have indeed.
Why does
was
it? Why
that?
does it feel like, when you say a number like that, which obviously is a fake number, but it sounds real when you're talking about it in the context of Godzilla, a gajillion Godzilla movies.
Exactly. What was that exercise like? Well, how fun was that journey for you?
It was quite incredible, honestly. I made the decision to watch all of them from in chronological order, and anyone who has the patience to do it, I actually highly recommend the journey.
Okay.
To see Godzilla as a character just evolve. You literally see his character make certain stages of transformation from decade to decade. How is he in the 50s versus the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way to today, the 2020s. It's very interesting to see the tangents he makes as a character. When does he come back to his roots, and when is he silly again? It's like it's always a pendulum that swings.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds like James Bond when you say it that way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's funny that you invoke James Bond there, Brennan, because earlier, before we started recording, Kevin noted to me, and I did not know this, but it's obvious now that he said it out loud, that there are twice as many Godzilla movies
Almost.
as there are James Bond.
Almost. It's like approaching that.
Which is because there's a lot of James Bond movies too, so it just puts that into perspective.
Maybe that should be the new James Bond movie. James Bond fights Godzilla.
There you go. Aaron Taylor Johnson can handle that. Yeah, him and Godzilla going toe to toe.
Yeah. Okay. Now I want him for Bond if that's gonna be the case.
Well, that is very exciting. Kevin has a new article at AwardsWatch where he talks about his experience and ranks all 38 movies. It's a really great read.
Amazing.
Long. It's a lengthy article, of course, but certainly worth your time.
So worth it. Really well done, sir. It was really great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was quite a conversation with Eric, because most of these lists, especially for a list with this many movies, you generally have just one paragraph talking about each movie. But I figured very early on, I told Eric, one paragraph's not enough, man.
No,
it's really not enough, because you got to be very specific.
Yes.
Otherwise, that one paragraph is going to sound like I'm talking about the same movie over and over again.
Yeah, no, that's what I found most impressive about this. I mean, because even the films you have ranked at the bottom still have 3-4 paragraphs per film. So you get really analytical and thoughtful about the whole thing, which is why I emphasize it might take a little while to read, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great stuff here. So
even the worst Godzilla movies are really fascinating on in their own way, and each one is worth talking about. Even if I hated it, or even if most people would hate it, there's a lot to talk about and analyze.
Yeah.
You have 4 quite meaty paragraphs on the 98 Godzilla, which is low on the list and where it should be.
That does not
but-
surprise me, though. There is so much to talk about, especially given like
Yeah.
maybe our respective ages, because a lot of us grew up with that movie.
Yes, correct.
So
Sure.
yeah, that's nostalgia fodder right there. That's basically what
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, I mean, I opened my paragraph on Godzilla 98 with the fact that it was my first Godzilla movie growing up. You know, as a kid, that was the companion movie to Jurassic Park. I would watch
Sure.
those two
Yeah.
movies just together all the time. And like, you know, so I've seen Godzilla 98 like a gajillion times. And like, there are days where I like it more. There's days where I really dislike it. And during this marathon, like, the marathon puts things really in perspective because Godzilla
Sure.
98 ends up being like the 29th film. And when you see it as the 29th film, it really is underwhelming and disappointing about it. Like, your enjoyment of it has to involve like ignoring a ton of components that makes the big G the way he is, you know?
Yeah, I
sure.
will say this about Godzilla 98 is that say what you will about the movie, but the marketing for it is something I'll always remember.
Oh yes,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's a like
Yeah,
if
I
you
remember
grew
seeing
up
that
with
as
it
a
like
kid,
we did.
and I loved it as a kid, but I remember being so blown away by the marketing that when I first saw the movie, I was like, oh, it's just a normal movie. Okay.
Yeah, it turns out. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it was a fascinating read, and I'm with you. I haven't seen a lot of these movies, admittedly, but even with the Godzilla films I have seen, 98 certainly is distinct for better or worse.
Yeah.
At any rate, we're not here to get into the franchise as a whole. We're here to talk about the latest installment in the MonsterVerse, if you will. Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire, as we found out on the main show this last week. For anyone that listened to that, Brendan and I did a deep dive and trying to figure out the name, and we got there eventually.
And funny
neither
enough,
of
you
us can
forgot the
remember.
name even after you had seen the movie.
Exactly. Exactly.
Should
All
have been
right.
called Godzilla X Kong Frozen Empire.
Yeah.
Gosh. Oh my! Why didn't
Wouldn't
I not
that have
think
been
of that?
amazing?
Yeah, but this is why you're here, man.
I didn't even put that together till now, and now I really want that to happen.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if Tom Cruise is involved in this. His movies tend to have these name changes after the film comes out. Maybe they
Yeah,
can
I think
take
it's time for a
inspiration
name
from
change.
Mr.
Yeah.
Cruise.
Yeah.
Got to change it. What if it really was Frozen Empire, and then they heard about the Ghostbusters film? Was like, God, now we got to change it.
The New Empire. The New Empire does, in context, kind of sound like a last minute.
Like we made this up on the spot. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably why I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah.
At
Because
any rate.
I'm sure the studios thought that just Godzilla X Kong or An Kong, whatever you want to pronounce it as, Godzilla times Kong, Godzilla multiplied by Kong, is just going to lead to too much confusion. So a subtitle is probably necessary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
For sure.
All right. Well, let's get into it. It is directed by Adam Wingard. It stars Rebecca Hall, Brian Tyree Henry, Dan Stevens, Kaylee Heidel, once again, the MVP here, among others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with Godzilla X Kong, the Frozen Empire, that's how I'm going to refer to it. It is, of course, about the two ancient titans, Godzilla and Kong. They clash in an epic battle as humans unravel their intertwined origins and connection to Skull Island's mysteries. All right.
Oh, wait, that's what it's about?
I was about to say the same thing. That brings a little bit more cogency to things.
Okay, the
let's
mythology
dive-
makes slightly more sense, I guess.
Let's get into it. We'll start with you, Kevin. What did you think about Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire?
Yeah, so this movie has a really interesting position in terms of the MonsterVerse because the previous movie, Godzilla versus Kong, really was like the movie that the MonsterVerse was building towards. You have two independent Godzilla movies. You've got Kong Skull Island, and they started teasing this idea that Godzilla and Kong are finally going to be in a movie together once again, like for the first time in 60 years, right? And the way that movie ended, Godzilla versus Kong, it felt like a finale to the MonsterVerse. And so going into this one, there's like this big looming question over like, well, okay, well, where can we go from here? Like what new stuff is there going to be? And I feel like that struggle you can see that struggle throughout the entire movie. The movie like really desperately tries to have a new plot that has some sort of urgency going on, some sort of relevance to keep you invested. And I think that hurts the first half of the movie a lot. The first half of the movie for me was very much bogged down by a ton of exposition, a lot of fantasy techno babble like language where we follow these human characters a lot, which most of them are returning human characters from the previous film. But here it's a lot of human characters unraveling this new undiscovered part of Hollow Earth. And a lot of it feels like setup. Meanwhile, when the movie is about the monsters, it feels like a completely different movie in a good way and bad way. And so it's overall, it's a mixed bag for me. It's okay. It's a lot of fun when the movie is about the monsters. And when the movie's not with the monsters, boy, I felt like even on MonsterVerse standards, this one was a bit of a step down. So it sits like right in the middle for me.
Yeah, you're right that I think from a plotting standpoint, it kind of feels like an afterthought in some ways. And I think it's because of how Godzilla versus Kong concluded, which admittedly, that's a film I didn't love because I feel like really its high point is that final act. But that's, that is one that, I mean, all these MonsterVerse movies really have the same problem, and that's so much time is spent to human characters just plowing exposition towards us. And Godzilla versus Kong is the one that probably has too many characters, more so than any of the other ones, I think. But it does end on such a high note that I was this close to being willing to forgive it, I guess, which is why Godzilla X Kong, or whatever you want to call it, the whole movie kind of feels like a third act climax. And I do think it does lead to being a mixed bag for those reasons. I will say, though, I think it does fix some of the frustrations I've had with this overall universe in some ways, because for the first time, the human characters didn't bother me as much despite the expository nature of them, because they at least realize, okay, we've got some talented actors here. Let's at least give them some quirks to work with. So there's at least there's a little bit more personality here, especially when you have someone like Dan Stevens and someone like Rebecca Hall, who is giving a performance that a movie like this does not even require. And yet somehow she shows up to work. And I really respect that about her. Even if she really is just there to verbalize scientific jargon that literally makes no sense. And yet her job is to make you feel like, okay, I guess I can buy that because the plot requires it. and that's all she's there for. And if that's what I have to judge it on, then she succeeds in that regard. So I wanted to like it more because I feel like it was veering more in a direction that I was hoping to see. There are actually a lot of moments here of what I call visual monster storytelling, where it's just these monster characters kind of doing their thing without any dialogue. And I found that kind of interesting. I feel like this is the first one that probably embraces the monsters as individual characters more so than anything else. So like there are things about it that I do like, even if from a plotting standpoint, it's the one that feels the most like an afterthought or an epilogue. So it's probably not going to be as memorable as the rest. And I'm admittedly not the biggest fan of these 5 movies in general. So I'm kind of with you, Kevin. Kind of just sits right in the middle for me.
Yeah, I thought this film was gloriously dumb.
Oh, it is dumb.
Preposterous and all kinds of absurd. Once again, the plotting and world building is extraordinarily hollow, very much pun intended, which is impressive because there's a myriad of it, as you guys are talking about. Somehow they find a way to fill 2 hours with incessant plotting, and yet it doesn't feel that expansive. But in a way,
it's a very small movie in a lot of ways. It really is.
Yeah. At the same time, I don't know if any of that matters, because who doesn't get revved up seeing Kong and Godzilla team up to face off against the Scar King? That's all I wanted to see, and the film gave it to me, which was a lot of fun, and that would have been enough to be satisfying. However, it does something even more impressive, and this circles back to what you were just talking about there, Brennan. It demonstrates impeccably that these films don't need any human characters. The battles were gratifying. But what I loved, seeing Godzilla take a nap after a hard day's work, watching Kong go to the dentist with a toothache, or Kong having a nice quiet dinner at sunset with his new little friend. A silent buddy movie where Kong and Godzilla just hang out and occasionally take out a destructive titan would 1000% be my jam. That would be awesome. I hope
we've been
that's what the
asking
next
for this
one
for
is.
like 10 years, haven't we?
Yes, that's really all that I want. I think that would be great. And this film proves it can work because those are some of the best scenes here.
This is the one that comes the closest to that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I will say, though, Jaya, is that the character's name? Is that how you say
Yes,
it?
played by
Jaya can
Otto.
stay. She's
Yeah.
very endearing, and Kong loves her, of course, so she can stay. Bernie and Trapper can also stay and provide some comedic commentary. The rest of the human characters, though, God love Rebecca Hall, but the rest of them, we don't need them. Let's just have the silent buddy movie with Kong and Godzilla. That's all we need, really.
All you need, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's all you
sit
need.
with this anyway. That was my takeaway.
I will say though, I've never really loved the human characters in these movies in general, but Dan Stevens, even though he's basically playing Star-Lord in many ways, like even with the soundtrack and everything like that, he is basically a Marvel character. But I kind of went with it. I appreciated him being very committed to the comedic bit, and when there were those obvious needle drops a few times through the film, I kind of dug it. I have to admit, I kind of dug it. So I at least respect this film for the first time, kind of embracing that kind of absurdity when it comes to the human characters. But yeah, if this were a silent film of just monsters going about their day, Godzilla taking a nap in the Coliseum, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that like a lot of previous Godzilla movies like just really, really nail, like especially the silly ones. You know, there are movies where Godzilla has his buddy Anguirus with him, and there's one of them, Godzilla versus Gigan, literally has speech bubbles when Godzilla and Anguirus are like talking to each other. Where like this movie absolutely is like a huge leap forward. I felt like Wingard kind of already had some of this in his previous film. One of my favorite things about Godzilla versus Kong is just the amount of thought being put into the visual design of Godzilla and Kong, just like the way they glare at each other. There's like these beats, the way they look at each other, you can see them like communicating to one another. You can sense like Godzilla's annoyance, or like when he tells Kong to stand down. He doesn't have to actually say it, but you can see it in his eyes. The way he stomps on Kong, he's like, enough, you know, stand down. And then in this movie, you kind of feel that too. There's when you get to the moment where Kong realizes he's got to ask Godzilla for help, and Godzilla sees Kong, and you can just see it on Godzilla's face. He's like, "You again."
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And like these are absolutely the best moments in the movie, like for sure. I also totally would want just a full movie, just like silent, wordless movie of just following these monsters. I'm really glad that moviegoers are like catching on to that and just enjoying it for what it is. I just wish the human characters just had a bit more to do this time, because like as I understand, the human characters in these MonsterVerse movies are never that interesting,
right?
But I felt like even so, like the human characters in some of these previous movies, at least the stuff that they were doing, like the actions that they were doing, were somewhat relevant to the plot, you know. And I couldn't help but also think about some previous MonsterVerse characters that should have been here. Like I personally felt Alexander Skarsgård should have been here. You know, I would have loved to see his dynamic with Trapper. You know,
I'm at a point now where it's like I'm starting to forget which human characters are actually in which movies. Because I had to get to think like which one did Millie Bobby Brown? So she was in 2 of them. I forgot about that. And it's like it got to moments like that.
Sure.
I think you're right though, Kevin. That from a visual standpoint, I think Adam Wingard maybe nails the glariness, if you want to call it that, in Godzilla versus Kong a bit more, because here we do get a lot of monsters going about their day, so to speak. But I think visually, this is kind of the sludgiest looking of the five. I mean, it's kind of like a hodgepodge of just computer imagery, and it doesn't quite have the compositional range that some of the other films have here. It's more or less just a light show in some ways.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I would say, like, looking at it, it's quite a colorful movie, but I think it's harder to pick up because all these sequences with just the monsters, it feels like we're watching an animated movie. And it gets to a point where Hollow Earth, like, as colorful as it is, it doesn't really leave that strong of an impression anymore. Me personally, I think the most colorful thing the MonsterVerse has ever done is the nighttime fight in Hong Kong between Godzilla and Kong. Like, those neon lights from those buildings, it just creates such a lasting impression compared to the color. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Plus there's the tangible issue, which I know there's a lot of people criticizing this new one, about that this new one no longer has that sense of scale. I get that, but when it's in service of having the monsters actually be characters, I get it. It's okay. We're following these monsters as if they're characters to follow. So we're already adding some sort of anthropomorphization. I don't know how.
Nice work. Nice work.
So we're seeing these monsters, and like, when we're following Kong for that long, and the baby Kong, Kong starts to feel like human size, like the baby Kong starts to seem really tiny until the final fight, when we get to the city and we realize, oh no, baby Kong is still huge.
yeah, exactly. Like, there's moments where they give us that scale a little bit, but that's what's maybe interesting about Hollow Earth, if there's anything at all. It's that it's the scale of it is to the titans and the monsters that live there, and they're that size because of the scope of Hollow Earth, which is obviously very different than Earth's surface. So they do feel more natural to that world, and they don't come off as these large animals per se.
Right, exactly.
When they're going through Italy or wherever they are, destroying cities, they do come off as.
That's why the landmarks are
monsters.
here. They're there to remind you that these are still monsters after all, and they're not like little pets in your playpen or something like that.
Right.
And if I do appreciate Hollow Earth for anything, even though the world building is absurd and preposterous and none of it makes any sense, especially as it relates to the human characters, but it does at the very least give this franchise a different space to explore these characters, other than regurgitating the same things over and over again. How many times are we going to see these titans just destroy a major city on Earth? So at least we're in a new space. It's more expansive, that fits their size, and it gives more credence to the choices they make as far as giving these characters actual characterization. To your point, Kevin, about how they very intentionally infuse that into the imagery, how that comes through in the visuals and the facial tics that they're able to render. I mean, we're able to understand every single thing they're saying or thinking, evoking. It all comes through visually impeccably, and not just with Godzilla and Kong, but with Scar King as well. All of the other apes that are enslaved there. Like, the storytelling, despite obviously having no dialogue, is very easy to follow. And I love that the film is able to give us that simplicity. It's a nice contradiction to the the massive convoluted world building you get with the human characters, and I just love that we get to hang out with them. Kong is very endearing and friendly, and you love that heroism that he evokes, and how he brings Godzilla into it all. And maybe this is a little bit of a spoiler, and we can certainly get into spoilers here in a little bit, but there's a moment near the end. I think what's so great about that pyramid sequence is you almost have these brothers that are fighting, and then Mothra comes in to be like, okay, boys, I need you to calm down, because there's bigger.
It's amazing.
Mothra's totally mother.
Oh,
Like,
it's
and I just
oh, it's
love that
amazing.
moment.
Yeah.
Oh, if you've seen there, so there's a lot of other Godzilla movies where Mothra's role is to literally come in and straighten their asses.
Yeah, it's great.
There's like one where it's Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, where that is the first movie that King Ghidorah shows up in, and Godzilla's too busy fighting Rodan in that movie, and a Mothra in larvae form shows up and just webs both of them in the face to get them to stop fighting, and it's hilarious.
That's a nice little Easter egg there.
That's great. Yeah,
You know,
just
I will
love that
say,
moment.
as much as we joke about the film's title, which I feel like we can continuously do, it is weirdly my biggest problem with the movie, because for a movie that's called Godzilla X Kong or An Kong or whatever, this really feels more like a King Kong movie than anything else. In fact, it feels more like a Kong movie than Kong Skull Island did. Which is a weird thing to kind of say because we get so much of that. So there are times that I do feel like Godzilla was kind of a interjecting afterthought at times before it leads to a great climax, because at least in other movies where Godzilla is one of the titular characters, including Godzilla versus Kong, even if you don't see him that often, his presence is always looming in the background. Like there's this overarching threat. And that's, and it's not a bad thing that it's not the case here, but it also kind of is, because like that dynamic is so interesting and it built itself up to be so interesting at the end of Godzilla versus Kong that it almost feels like this is a movie that's trying to build to the same thing again. And we've already kind of done that. So that's where the whole movie, as we talked about earlier, Kevin, kind of feels like an afterthought. But it's still fun when they show up together. It's still fun when you got two brothers, two siblings, a sibling rivalry, if you want to call it that, which is basically what it is. It's fun there. Yeah,
it's really difficult to make a movie with Godzilla as actually the full protagonist, because seeing all the previous films, like he's not in his own movie that much actually. You know, is like take the old movies where Godzilla fights Mothra, for example. They are largely Mothra movies, and Godzilla is there as the villain for Mothra to stop.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so it makes a lot of sense here and in the previous one to have Kong be the focus, because there's a natural human core that it's easier for moviegoers to find in Kong. You can see that humanoid personality behind Kong much easier, and
that's a great point.
And like Godzilla is usually just like he's either a bully or just a wandering hunk. You know, you're just waiting for him to show.
He's mad as hell and can't take it anymore.
Yeah, you're just waiting for him to get on board, you know. So he's kind of a
who
one
he is here, pretty much.
Yeah.
I guess the difference here is that, because I agree, you know, he's not really a character that you can really personalize as much as like Kong, as you're talking about there so eloquently. In a movie like Godzilla versus Kong, I still never forgot that Godzilla was in the picture.
Right, true.
And in the case here, there are many occasions where I completely forgot Godzilla was even here.
No, absolutely, because it strictly speaking, like in terms of what they're doing plot-wise, at least in the previous film, Godzilla senses that threat of Ghidorah still being alive in the form of Mechagodzilla. So Godzilla's trying to look for it. Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, Kong is in the way, and so Godzilla's like, "Can you get out of the way?" And that's how they fight. This one, you're right. Godzilla's just kind of just wandering around and like farming XP off of other monsters.
That's pretty much. It almost feels completely separate. I was sitting there wondering what the whole idea behind Godzilla is here, because he fights off the one Titan at the beginning of the film. Again, goes to take a nap after a hard day's work. I love that. I would have seen a whole movie of
I like that idea.
Go to work, go home. We just saw that, right?
I saw it going on Twitter, something going viral of an image of Godzilla sleeping in the Coliseum and saying like, "If it fits, I sits," or something like that.
I love that. And then he goes and siphons off a bunch of nuclear energy somewhere. And then in between that and heading off to the next place, I guess he saw Barbie and was inspired and found his energy and needed to He needed a new makeup change, and so that's what he did. Like, but the film doesn't really ever explain like why is he gaining all this nuclear energy, because it doesn't really align with he's about to fight the Scar King, because he doesn't know about the Scar King, or at least if he does, the film I don't think makes that very clear. It's all very confusing.
Yeah, it was like a really quick throwaway exposition line that Rebecca Hall's character says about how Godzilla also senses this threat, so he's like preparing.
Of course he does.
It's like, okay.
Yeah.
That's her way of trying to create a scientific reason for, oh yeah, Godzilla's also in this movie, is basically what she's saying.
But
Yeah.
when Kong shows up, though, like, he fights Kong as if that is the threat, though.
Yeah,
which is why it's, I don't know, it's all very strange.
All right, now we're getting a little bit too detailed here.
Yeah, like, you can't really think about it too much, I guess. That's why I loved the fight sequence alone, despite how we get there. Maybe that's what makes the Mothra moment great, though, is she does bring a little bit of cogency to this. Like, okay, let's stop fighting. Let's get to the main thing.
You do know someone's going to make an edit of this movie and add their own funny subtitles to all the monster scenes, right?
Well, so actually, I was gonna say, like, I wouldn't be surprised if, when they were putting this film together, if they actually had dialogue for all the monsters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to kind of guide them through
That
it.
makes
I
sense.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised.
I could definitely see that. Yeah.
Yeah, would not be surprised if that's how they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all that comes through very clear. I think that's why I simply fell for those scenes, and it was really fun just to see them hang out and live similar lives that we do. I go to work and I come home and want a nap. Like I could understand. Like, I don't understand anything Rebecca Hall's doing. That's way outside my wheelhouse. It's above my pay grade. Maybe
It's
the
like attending a
podcast
meeting
thing.
that you have no business being in.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know anything about the human characters, but I absolutely relate with Kong and Godzilla here.
I think the reason why is because, and this is the funny thing, right? Because this movie would totally appeal to kids. They're gonna have a lot of fun. But I think what's really funny is that in a humorous way, it appeals to adults, because I think both Godzilla and Kong, but especially Godzilla in this movie, is a total mood.
Yeah, it is.
He is. He really
Very
is.
much is. Yeah,
You know, and so it makes their confrontation in front of the pyramids like hilarious. You have that moment where Godzilla does a suplex on Kong, which is hysterical, and then Kong gets like annoyed, so he's just beating him, and then my favorite just image in the entire film is when Kong's dragging Godzilla by the tail to try to get him back into the portal.
That's so good.
So they do seem like brothers here. They really do.
It's great. You articulate it perfectly, Kevin, because I did take my son Sam, who's 8, to see this, and he's loved all these movies, and he loved this film. Absolutely adored the movie. But as far as that mood you're talking about, that's exactly where I fell with this film.
Right?
I just vibed with it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's a mood. You just instantly see yourself in them. It's like, oh yeah, I feel that. I would nap
toothache. I needed to go to the dentist too.
I too would nap in the Coliseum if I could.
Exactly. Sometimes you make a mess and you just need to take a shower right afterwards. Like, I get it. I understand Kong here.
I could have sworn as a kid, I think I've played with robot hands before too.
Exactly. Yeah, we've all
makes no
had.
sense, but of course, maybe I had Hulk hands or something like that. But it's still like that seemed like the kind of toy I would play with as a kid. That Kong gets.
I never had frostbite, but growing up in Michigan, you spend a lot of winter nights playing in the snow, and I've had my fair share of I'm freezing and I can't really move, and so I can somewhat understand that. A little bit. So yeah, I mean, I was fully with the vibe of Kong and him just hanging out here. I totally loved it.
I will say, when Kong gets his first appointment, which is a dental appointment, which is on its face is just such a funny idea. What is Dan Stevens' it's Trapper. Is that his name?
Yeah, Trapper.
Yeah. What does he say? Like it's like a glorified silver tooth that he gets, but it's strong enough to like bite through like the hardest of metals. And I'm thinking like, well, that's not the last time we're going to see that show up, and it never gets referenced ever again. Like I thought it was going to be used as a weapon or some kind of thing, and
Nope.
never really happens.
It's just a gag. Like it's something that comes up later when Scar King makes fun of him. And
Yes.
Which, to your point, Kevin, about them having subtitles, that absolutely feels like a palpable moment where they had subtitles there, and they're making they're mocking
palpable
him.
ridicule. Yeah,
They're making fun of his metal tooth, and so we don't need to hear it, but that comes through vividly, and they're all laughing at him. Ha ha ha! He's got this tooth. So like it's just a gag for Scar King to make fun of him. Like that's the only reason it's there.
which weirdly makes me respect it at the same time.
I agree. Like they humanize those characters more than the human characters. I don't know how they pull that off. But
It's about time. It's like that's why I can't say it's the best movie in this franchise, because it has those problems like we talked about. But it's the first one that seemed like it was kind of listening to us to kind of give some of the things that we've been asking for. So it kind of straddles that line a little bit, which I at least appreciated.
I think this movie is like the ultimate sleepover movie for kids. Like you can just imagine like a group of 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds. They're like hanging out and like they're eating snacks, they're drinking soda, they want to put up a movie in the living room. This is that movie.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is it. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, and I hope if they're gonna make another one, which I assume they will, I hope they continue this trend, or go full on no human characters. I'd be okay with that. Champion. I will see that day one. Yes.
Let's make that petition.
Well, exactly. I mean, I have a theory as to what they'll do next, because I'm not sure. Again, like just like when Godzilla versus Kong ended, I don't know where the MonsterVerse can go next. Which, by the way, this is a challenge that this is a struggle that Toho has experienced every decade. Every decade, they make a new Godzilla movie. They make 3 or 4 more, and then they're like out of ideas again. Yeah. And then they give that monster a hiatus, and then take a break, and then they come back with like another fresh iteration. Yeah. I have a guess as to what the MonsterVerse is going to do next, but I personally feel like we are approaching that moment of the end of a specific era of Godzilla movies where it's time to take a break. Yeah, and I hope the MonsterVerse, Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers would like sort of follow Toho's footsteps, because like you kind of sense when it's diminishing returns, but like
the wheels are spinning now. They really
the wheels are spinning. Each era of Toho Godzilla movies, you have that one wheel spinning movie where it's like, okay, it's time.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily the worst film in that specific like phase, if you want to call it that, but it's just the one where you notice where it's leading to those diminishing returns. And I think you're right. This again, we've said this word before. It does feel like that afterthought or that epilogue. Like maybe there was a contractual obligation to make yet another movie, and this is something that they can come up with. I do hope that there is at least maybe a rebranding that happens after this, because I don't know where it goes from here.
Yeah, but I mean, given the impressive box office performance by it seems like they're
not how
definitely
American
doing
movie
another.
studios work.
What I hear you guys are saying is that they're running out of ideas, their wheels are spinning, and that leaves room for the only logical conclusion here: a silent
monster buddy movie.
Buddy movie. Exactly. Where you don't need plot, you don't need giant stakes. The world doesn't have to come to an end.
Make it like an
they
animated
just
nature
hang
movie.
out. They go to the dentist. They go to work. They take some naps. I mean,
I'm totally down. I'm totally down. I mean, this movie already introduces like a baby Kong, right? That he essentially he adopts him at the end as his son.
Parents.
And so the next movie, just do Son of Godzilla. Toho did that once already in the 60s. Just do Son of Godzilla.
Exactly. Okay. I'm just saying.
I'm already in.
If
just bring vanilla into America here.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to be championing for. So I'm just saying, or the other version, which I know a lot of people have talked about, and we keep this show PG, but there is the crass version where some people just want to see these two at each other. If you know what I mean? So you could go that route too. I'm just saying.
Is that what the X means now? X-rated?
Exactly.
They go at it lovingly.
Lovingly. I would see that too.
Our
Look,
minds go.
I'd be there. Yeah. At any rate, do you guys have any final thoughts on Godzilla, Kong, the New Empire?
Yeah, I think we summed it up pretty well. Like we talked about a lot of details about the film. I think in some ways it really embraces that silliness of Godzilla in the 70s, while still having that just enough of that sense of peril and danger that, like, yeah, these are giant monsters and they can wreck stuff, right? And then there are other aspects of it where it does feel like a disappointment compared to films that came before. So it's like a little bit in the middle. But I think it's such a fascinating case of what do you look for when you go to a Godzilla movie? So, like, with there being so many different Godzilla movies of so many genres too, it's like you ask a Godzilla fan, like, what are some of your favorite Godzilla movies? And some of them would say the one where he fights another monster. Yeah. Some others would say the one where he's by himself, right? And I think especially with right now, are the two most recent Godzilla movies are this one and Godzilla -1. Yeah. Two completely different kinds of movies. And it has made the conversation online, like, you know, really, really interesting. But I think it's important to remind everybody that, like, Godzilla has always been like this. He has his really grim, somber movies where he's about something, he represents something. And then there's the ones where big monsters go punch, punch, bonk, bonk, you know?
Yeah.
Which makes me appreciate the existence of this one even more, because if you look at it just in the context of the MonsterVerse, I feel like this is the one that weirdly stimulates the most conversation about what a Godzilla movie ultimately is. And maybe it's the timing of it all. And also just like what we're talking about, what this film actually gets away with by focusing more on the monsters than ever before and actually creating characterizations for them this time around, which they've kind of done in these 5 movies before, but never to this degree.
Yeah, never.
Yeah, and I do like that about it, which is why it does sit in the middle. It's got like this kind of tug of war happening between what makes it better than most of these in this MonsterVerse and then what makes it worse.
Yes.
Which is, so I am curious between the both of you, like, just with these 5 movies in the MonsterVerse, how do you rank these 5 at this point?
Yeah, so my favorite MonsterVerse is still the Gareth Edwards one.
Yeah.
The 2014 Godzilla. I think that one is just so as much as that movie has writing issues, I think Gareth Edwards just directs the heck out of that one.
It's too well made.
It's so beautifully realized. There's so many gorgeous sequences in that movie that most blockbusters just don't have the skill or patience to put together, you know. And so that I think of the American Godzilla movies, because this is another thing that's really interesting, because, you know, Godzilla originally representing this metaphor for nuclear holocaust, there is something that we have to acknowledge, which is Godzilla being a creative creation from Japan, being the only country still in world history to have experienced the power of an atomic bomb. And so there, thematically, like, there's something like that you can't replicate that here fully. And so I really respect Gareth Edwards for his attempt in creating a Western take on what Godzilla represents. And so he ended up making a movie that's about, like, the insignificance of human beings, honestly, is what he did, which is why his visual approach of just how massive they are, it's more than just seeing how big the monsters are. It's just showing how powerless we are as people, right? So that one is definitely my favorite one still. And then after that would be Godzilla versus Kong, because I think that one is, like, so gorgeous and colorful, and it's got in my opinion, the best fight choreography of all the 5 MonsterVerse movies. Then after that would be Kong Skull Island. I think that movie has some writing issues here and there, but it's also so gorgeous. I love the yellow hue that movie has. Also, really good sense of scale. Then after Kong Skull Island will be this new one, and then I have King of the Monsters at the end, which again this is like a very polarizing opinion, because I know people who have King of the Monsters as one of the worst, and I know people who have King of the Monsters as one of the best.
Yeah,
I think King of the Monsters is that movie where you can tell, especially if you've seen all the other Godzilla movies, that Michael Dougherty, the director of King of the Monsters, is a huge fan of Godzilla. And you can tell that when he brought King Ghidorah and Mothra and Rodan to life, there's like a big responsibility to that, because it's the first time we see those three monsters in a Hollywood movie. And so there's a lot of like homages that he's paying to it, and I totally get that. I totally respect that. But the thing that just holds it back all the time is that movie is so visually ugly to look at. It's just it just takes place at night in the snow or in the rain, and you're like squinting all the time at it, and then occasionally getting blinded by all the lightning that King Ghidorah has. And it's not pleasant to look at.
Interestingly, every time I think about that movie, and every fond memory I have about that movie in particular, it's always that first trailer we got that utilized Claire de Lune.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which was, I'm not much of a trailer guy. You know this, Chidi, but that is a work of art when it comes to marketing. And I always think about that when I think about that movie. Where do you sit on these, JD, as far as a ranking is concerned?
Well, I'm with Kevin in the sense that the 2014 film is the best of them still. Even though the writing in all of them are some variation of a giant mess. Yeah. Like all of them struggle in terms of incorporating the monsters with the human characters in some way, shape, or form. But that 2014 Godzilla, to all of Kevin's points, at least renders Godzilla in this fascinating way where the scope and scale is incredibly visceral, and you really feel the size and the strength of him as a Titan. Like all of that comes through great. And the fighting at the end and the use of the atomic breath is extremely satisfying. So like I do agree that one is the best of them. Where I will differ with Kevin is that the rest of them are very interchangeable for me. And ironically, I have Godzilla King of the Monsters at number 2 because I find it
to your point, Kevin. Yeah.
I find it to be the most visually alluring of the rest of them.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Almost exclusively, that's why I have it.
I knew he was going to
2.
say that. The second you mentioned how ugly that film was, Kevin, I was looking at JD's face. It's like, oh, he's got some fighting notes.
I found it hilarious. I didn't want to say anything in the moment because I was just going to wait to bring it up here. And I didn't want to spoil the surprise, I guess. But yeah, I find that film to be visually way more appealing than the others. Although Godzilla vs. Kong, I agree, has some great choreography, some great use of color at times. Same with Kong Skull Island. There are some interesting visual moments there. And going into this new one, that's how I would rank them, is King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong, and then Kong Skull Island. But from a storytelling perspective, again, all three of those, I don't have a passionate opinion. They're all a giant mess.
They do get interchangeable, and it sounds like we're all on the same page of Gareth Edwards' film being the best of the 5. And it's really just because of how well made it is. Like,
I will say real fast, though, Brendan, this new one I would probably put at number 3 just because of the hangout vibe of it all. Again, almost exclusively because of that. I don't know if it's a better movie. It probably isn't better than Godzilla vs. Kong. I would say that's a better movie. Even Kong Skull Island is maybe a better movie. But I responded way more to the hangout vibe of this than I did any of the highs of those two.
Totally fair. That's a totally fair assessment.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think this one that we're just finishing up the conversation on, Godzilla X Kong, is that it does give the most interesting points to talk about. I think it makes it the most fascinating of these 5, which is probably why I would put it in that middle ground. I think Maybe the only difference between the three of us is that I think my least favorite of the 5 is Kong Skull Island, and I think it's because it's the one with the most wasted potential for me, because it has such a great cast. That is such an amazing cast, and every time I go back to that movie, it's like, how do you make John Goodman boring? How do you make Tom Hiddleston boring? How do you make Toby Kebbell boring? And he's playing 2 characters, including Kong himself. Now, Kong's great in that movie, but like, how do you make these people so bland? And it's the one that annoys me the most because of that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's
Fair enough.
yeah. I mean, then again, none of these movies care about characters, but when you have that kind of cast, you can almost get away with it, and somehow it doesn't.
Right. Also a fair assessment.
Understandable.
Yeah.
So,
By the way,
all right.
Interesting world that they've established here for sure.
So those are our thoughts. I will say this as a final thought, because I've been championing this whole conversation, but I have found it. I know exactly what to do for the next one.
Okay.
Godzilla and Kong, the subtitle, Perfect Days, directed by Wim Wenders. I found the director. I know exactly how this is going to work.
Hey, we already know this movie like its needle
to
drops.
Perfect Days.
Yeah,
all
so just
that I'm saying.
Just switch the needle drops to songs like Lou Reed's "Perfect Day" or The Animals' "House of the Rising Sun."
Yeah, because look, he made that work impeccably. That is an awesome movie. Perfect Days is, and just supplement Godzilla and Kong in there, and you have it.
I would see that as someone that thinks Perfect Days is one of the 5 best movies of the whole decade so far.
Yeah.
I'll take that vibe.
Yeah.
Do we agree that the title of the next one is going to be Godzilla and Kong? So we have GVK, GXK, and then GNK.
Yeah. And
Godzilla minus Kong?
But Kong? Yeah, it's probably going to be and Kong. It has to be.
That's who they were talking about over at Toho. Godzilla -1 is minus Kong.
There you go.
That's the -1. Now I get it. Yeah. Okay, it all makes sense now. All right. Well, Kevin, thanks for being here. This was a ton of fun. I love this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Tell everyone where we can find you on social media, and where can we find your work online?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at klee_film review. My work is on AwardsWatch, Film Inquiry, and That Shelf. And JD said it best. I just put out a ranking of all 38 Godzilla movies, including this new one, because this new one is the 38th one. And so all of them is up to date from 1954, the original film, to 2024. It's 70 years of Godzilla movies.
Love it.
Wow.
Love it.
Yeah, that's an amazing exercise. I urge everyone to go and watch it. Obviously put a ton of work into it, and it comes through in the article. I mean, if you're a Godzilla fan, you need to check it out for sure.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks again for being here, Kevin. This was great. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, please let us know. If you're watching on YouTube, you can of course leave a comment below. For those listening, reach out to us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. Just search In Session Film. You'll find us there. You can always email us, insessionfilm@gmail.com. I believe that is it. Do you guys have any final thoughts on anything before we get out of here? Kevin, any final thoughts before we leave?
Just go have fun. If you haven't seen it yet, just go have fun.
Yeah.
And then go watch Godzilla -1.
Yeah.
Yes, you can enjoy both. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, that is a great final thought. Yeah. See both. A lot of fun. Very different movies. But that's what makes them.
One is fun.
unique.
One is legitimately great.
Exactly.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with all of that said, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks again, Kevin, for being here. And we'll see you all next time on the In Session Film Podcast.